Welcome back to the Numis Explorer, where every old coin can become a fascinating journey into American history, hidden minting mistakes, and the incredible world of coin collecting. And today we are taking a closer look at the 1978 D. Lincoln 1 cent, a coin that has become the subject of extraordinary claims about potentially reaching an unbelievable $116 million under an extremely rare and highly speculative combination of errors, condition, rarity, and collector demand. Before getting excited about that enormous figure, remember that a normal 1978 D cent is not automatically worth millions, and a dramatic value like $116 million would require an exceptional, authenticated, and genuinely unique specimen with extraordinary characteristics. So the real treasure hunt is discovering whether a particular coin contains something far beyond an ordinary example. The 1978 D cent was struck at the Denver Mint and carries the familiar Lincoln portrait on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, but collectors know that coins produced in large quantities can occasionally contain unusual minting errors and varieties that transform an otherwise common coin into a much more interesting collectible. One of the first possibilities to examine is a double die error, where parts of the design may show noticeable doubling because of a mistake involving the preparation of the die. Look closely at the date, lettering, Liberty, Indiana, God We Trust, and other design elements, because genuine hub doubling can sometimes create distinctive separation or secondary images, although ordinary machine doubling, die deterioration, or damage should not automatically be mistaken for a valuable doubled die. Another possibility is an off-center strike, which happens when a blank planchet is not positioned correctly between the dies during striking, leaving part of the design noticeably shifted toward the edge. The more dramatic and clearly documented the displacement, especially when important design details remain visible and the coin is still in excellent condition, the more interesting it can become to collectors. A broad strike is another possibility, occurring when the coin is struck without proper containment by the collar, potentially creating an unusually expanded shape while retaining recognizable details. There can also be clipped planchets, where a portion of the metal blank is missing because of a problem during the planchet making process, and these errors can sometimes be highly collectible when their characteristics clearly demonstrate that the mistake occurred at the mint rather than after the coin entered circulation. Another fascinating possibility involves a wrong planchet error, where a cent is accidentally struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or composition. Such mistakes are particularly intriguing because the weight, diameter, thickness, and metal composition can provide important clues, but these characteristics must be carefully tested and professionally authenticated before anyone can claim an extraordinary value. Die cracks, die breaks, cuds, struck-through errors, and other mint-made abnormalities can also attract collectors, especially when they are dramatic, clearly visible, and confirmed to have originated during production. A struck-through error can occur when foreign material or debris comes between the die and planchet, leaving an unusual impression or missing design detail, while a die break can produce raised areas of metal that reflect damage to the die itself. Another important factor is the coin's condition. A 1978 D cent that spent decades circulating through pockets, vending machines, cash registers, and countless transactions can show scratches, dents, discoloration, corrosion, and wear, while a carefully preserved example with sharp details, strong luster, and minimal marks can be far more desirable. Professional grading can therefore become extremely important when a coin appears to possess an unusual error, because authentication helps separate a genuine mint mistake from damage that happened after the coin left the mint. The possibility of an extraordinary valuation also depends heavily on rarity. Millions of coins may have been produced in a particular year, but a specific combination of unusual characteristics can be dramatically rarer. Imagine, for example, a hypothetical 1978 D cent that combines a major authenticated mint error, an unusual planchet, an extraordinary strike, exceptional preservation, and a documented history proving that it is a unique survivor. That would be a completely different collecting proposition from an ordinary 1978 D cent found in pocket change. However, collectors should be extremely cautious whenever they hear claims that a common-looking coin is automatically worth millions. Internet videos, social media posts, auction rumors, and sensational descriptions can sometimes exaggerate values, and an asking price is not the same thing as a confirmed auction result. The true value of a rare coin comes from evidence, authentication, condition, rarity, provenance, and what serious collectors are actually willing to pay. That is why the idea of a $116 million 1978 cent should be treated as a hypothetical or extraordinary claim rather than a guaranteed market value. Still, the possibility of finding a remarkable error is exactly what makes coin hunting so exciting. You could have a handful of old cents sitting in a jar, an inherited collection tucked away in a drawer, or a box of coins that has been ignored for years, and one unusual piece might deserve a much closer examination. If you find a 1978 cent, start by checking the mint mark, date, overall condition, weight, diameter, and design details, then inspect the coin under good lighting for genuine doubling, off-center striking, clipped planchet characteristics, die breaks, broad strike features, or other unusual mint-made characteristics. Avoid cleaning the coin, polishing it, scratching it, or attempting to alter the surface, because cleaning can permanently reduce collectible value and can make authentication more difficult. If something looks genuinely unusual, compare it with reliable numismatic references and consider submitting it to a respected professional grading and authentication service. The most exciting possibility is not simply finding an old coin, but finding evidence of a genuine production mistake that escaped the mint's quality control process and survived for decades. A dramatic error can tell a story about how coins were manufactured, how mechanical problems occurred, and how an ordinary piece of money became an accidental rarity. This is why the 1978 Lincoln cent continues to attract attention among people who enjoy searching through collections and examining coins for varieties and errors. The enormous $116 million figure makes for an incredible treasure hunting story, but the real lesson is that collectors should focus on verifiable characteristics rather than guaranteed riches. A coin does not become valuable simply because someone places a gigantic number beside its name. It needs genuine evidence, expert examination, and a market willing to recognize its rarity. So, if you have a 1978 cent in your collection, do not immediately assume it is either worthless or a millionaire maker. Instead, examine it carefully, preserve its original condition, learn the difference between real mint errors and post-mint damage, and investigate any unusual feature before making a claim about its value. Who knows what may be hiding inside an old coin box? The next coin you inspect could reveal an unusual strike, a fascinating die variety, or an error that deserves professional attention. That is the excitement of numismatics. History can literally fit between your fingers, and sometimes the smallest details can create the biggest mysteries. If you enjoy discovering rare coins, unusual mint errors, hidden varieties, and the fascinating stories behind American currency, make sure you stay connected with the Numis Explorer, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with fellow coin hunters. And most importantly, check your change carefully, because the difference between an ordinary cent and an extraordinary collectible can sometimes be found in one tiny detail that millions of people overlooked. Next, 1973 1-cent coin. Today we are taking a fascinating look at the 1973 Lincoln 1 cent, a coin that has inspired enormous claims of potentially reaching an astonishing $110 million when extraordinary errors, unusual mistakes, extreme rarity, exceptional condition, and intense collector interest all come together. Before we begin, it is important to understand that an ordinary 1973 Lincoln cent is not automatically worth $110 million, and such a spectacular figure should be treated as a hypothetical or sensational possibility rather than a guaranteed market price. The real excitement comes from discovering what unusual characteristics a particular 1973 cent might have and whether those characteristics can be authenticated as genuine mint errors or varieties. The 1973 Lincoln cent belongs to an important period in American coinage, and because enormous numbers of Lincoln cents were produced, most examples are common and have modest values, but that does not mean every individual coin is identical. During the minting process, planchets had to be prepared, dies had to be manufactured, coins had to be struck with enormous pressure, and every stage created opportunities for unusual mistakes. When something went wrong and a coin escaped quality control, collectors could eventually discover a fascinating error decades later. One of the first things to investigate on a 1973 cent is possible doubling. A genuine double die variety can occur when a die receives more than one impression during its creation, potentially producing noticeable separation in parts of the date, lettering, or design. Collectors should be especially careful here because not every appearance of doubling is valuable. Machine doubling, die deterioration, scratches, damage, and other forms of distortion can look unusual without representing a genuine double die. That is why careful examination and professional authentication are so important. Another possibility is an off-center strike. If the blank planchet is not properly aligned when the dies come together, the resulting coin can have the design shifted toward one edge, sometimes dramatically. A minor shift may be interesting, while a major and clearly documented off-center strike can become much more desirable. The degree of displacement, the amount of design remaining on the coin, the condition, and the authenticity of the error can all influence collector interest. Another possibility involves broad strikes, which can happen when a coin is struck without proper containment by the collar. This can create an unusual expansion of the planchet and produce a shape that differs from a normal cent. A genuine mint-made broad strike can be fascinating because it provides physical evidence of what happened during the striking process. There are also clipped planchets, where part of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck. A genuine clip can have characteristic features that help distinguish it from damage caused after the coin entered circulation. Collectors sometimes find coins with curved clips, straight clips, or other unusual missing sections, and professional examination can help determine whether the feature originated during planchet production. Another extremely interesting possibility is a wrong planchet strike. This happens when a coin is accidentally struck on a blank intended for a different denomination or potentially a different type of coin. Because planchets have specific weights, diameters, thicknesses, and compositions, a wrong planchet error can sometimes be identified through careful measurements and professional testing. If a 1973 Lincoln cent were ever confirmed to have been struck on an incorrect planchet under extraordinary circumstances, it could become a highly interesting numismatic discovery. However, weight alone is never enough to prove such an error, because circulation, environmental exposure, damage, or alterations can affect a coin's measurements. Another possibility involves die cracks and die breaks. As dies were repeatedly used under tremendous pressure, they could develop cracks or eventually break. These defects could transfer raised lines or larger raised areas onto coins. A particularly dramatic die break, especially one that creates an obvious cut near the edge of the coin, can be desirable to collectors because it records a specific stage in the life of the die. Struck-through errors are another category worth understanding. If foreign material, grease, debris, or another substance comes between the die and planchet during striking, some details may appear weak, missing, or distorted. A genuine struck-through error can be visually fascinating, but collectors must distinguish it from simple wear, corrosion, cleaning, or post-mint damage. The condition of a 1973 cent can also make a major difference. Many cents from this era spent decades circulating through pockets, cash registers, vending machines, drawers, and jars. As a result, they may have scratches, stains, dents, worn surfaces, or other signs of use. An example that was carefully preserved from the moment it was produced could have dramatically sharper details and stronger original surfaces. High-grade coins can attract stronger collector interest, particularly when they also possess a confirmed variety or mint error. This is where the combination of rarity and condition becomes important. A common coin in worn condition is one thing, but an exceptionally preserved coin with an unusual and authenticated mint error is an entirely different collectible. The idea behind an enormous $110 million valuation is therefore not that every 1973 cent is secretly worth a fortune, but that extraordinary numismatic value would require an extraordinary specimen. Imagine a hypothetical 1973 cent with a dramatic and previously unknown mint error, a rare planchet combination, exceptional strike characteristics, near-perfect preservation, and documented provenance showing that the coin is genuinely unique. Such a coin could attract enormous attention, especially if recognized by respected experts and offered in a major auction. Even then, the final value would depend on the actual market and the willingness of serious collectors to compete for it. This is an important distinction because online claims about rare coins can sometimes confuse asking prices, speculative estimates, insurance values, and confirmed auction results. A seller might list a coin for an enormous amount, but that does not prove anyone would actually pay that amount. Serious collectors look for evidence. They want authentication, reliable grading, clear photographs, documented varieties, and a credible explanation of why the coin is unusual. That is why anyone who believes they have a potentially valuable 1973 cent should resist the temptation to clean it. Cleaning, polishing, scraping, or applying chemicals can damage the original surfaces and potentially destroy evidence that might otherwise help establish the coin's authenticity. Instead, handle the coin carefully by its edges and place it in a suitable protective holder. If the coin appears genuinely unusual, professional examination is the safest route. One of the most exciting parts of collecting is learning to recognize the difference between an ordinary imperfection and a legitimate mint error. A small scratch caused by another coin is not the same as a die crack. A dent caused by circulation is not the same as an off-center strike. A strange color caused by environmental exposure is not automatically proof of a rare metal composition. An apparent doubling caused by machine movement is not necessarily a double die. Understanding these differences can save collectors from disappointment and can also help them recognize genuine discoveries when they encounter them. The 1973 cent is particularly interesting because it belongs to an era when Lincoln cents were still made primarily from the traditional bronze composition used before the major change to copper-plated zinc in the early 1980s. This historical context adds another layer of interest to the coin. Collectors can study its weight, diameter, color, surfaces, edge, strike, and design details to better understand what they have. The mint mark is another important detail. A 1973 cent with AD mint mark indicates production at the Denver Mint, while other examples can have different minting origins or characteristics. However, the absence or presence of a mint mark alone does not make an ordinary coin worth millions. What matters is whether the coin displays a genuine and desirable variety, error, or other exceptional characteristic. Another possibility collectors sometimes investigate is a die variety involving differences in lettering, spacing, shape, or other design details. These varieties can be subtle, and identifying them may require comparison with specialized references. A coin that looks ordinary to one person might reveal an interesting feature to an experienced numismatist. This is why magnification and good lighting can be useful when examining coins, although collectors should avoid excessive handling or any attempt to modify the surface. The most valuable discoveries often begin with curiosity. Someone finds an old cent, notices something unusual, and instead of dismissing it, they investigate. They compare it with other examples, check its specifications, research known varieties, and eventually seek professional opinion. Next, 1982 1-cent coin. Today we are exploring the 1982 Lincoln 1 cent, a coin that has become especially interesting to collectors because of its many possible varieties, transitional characteristics, minting errors, and unusual examples, with extraordinary claims sometimes suggesting that a spectacular specimen could potentially command an unbelievable $105 million under an exceptionally rare combination of errors, condition, rarity, provenance, and collector demand. Before anyone starts counting millions, however, it is important to understand that a normal 1982 Lincoln cent is not automatically worth anything close to that amount, and a gigantic figure such as $105 million should be treated as a hypothetical or sensational possibility rather than a guaranteed value. The real treasure hunt begins when we examine what makes certain 1982 cents different from ordinary examples and why collectors pay close attention to this particular year. The year 1982 is especially fascinating because it was a major transitional period in the history of the Lincoln cent, when the United States Mint changed from the traditional bronze composition to copper-plated zinc for regular cents, creating multiple combinations of date, mint mark, composition, and variety that collectors continue to study. This transition makes the 1982 cent particularly important because two major compositions were used during the year, and collectors can encounter both copper and copper-plated zinc examples depending on the specific coin. That means one of the first things to investigate when examining a 1982 cent is its weight and physical characteristics, although weight alone should never be considered proof of a rare variety. A genuine copper 1982 cent should generally have a different weight from a copper-plated zinc example, and careful measurement can help collectors determine which type they may have. The mint mark also matters because 1982 cents were produced at different facilities, and the Denver examples can carry the D mint mark. Another fascinating aspect of 1982 cents is the existence of several recognized date and mint mark varieties, making the year especially rewarding for collectors who enjoy searching through groups of Lincoln cents. One of the most famous areas of interest involves the small differences in the date and mint mark that can help distinguish one variety from another. Collectors often use magnification, reliable references, and comparison examples to identify these subtle characteristics. Some varieties can be difficult to recognize without experience, and an apparent difference may simply be the result of die wear, strike quality, or damage rather than a valuable variety. That is why careful research is essential before assigning an extraordinary value to any coin. Another major possibility is a double die error. If a die was improperly prepared and design elements received an additional impression at a slightly different position, the resulting coin can display genuine doubling in areas such as the date, lettering, or other design elements. Genuine double die characteristics are different from machine doubling, which can produce a flatter, shelf-like appearance caused by movement during the striking process. This distinction is extremely important because collectors can easily mistake one for the other. A genuine and significant double die can be collectible, while ordinary machine doubling may add little or no premium. The 1982 cent can also be examined for off-center strikes. During normal production, the blank planchet must be positioned correctly between the dies. If it shifts before or during striking, the design can become displaced toward one side. A dramatic off-center strike can be particularly interesting when the error is clearly mint-made, the date remains visible, and a substantial portion of the design is shifted away from the center. The greater the confirmed error and the better the condition, the more attention such a coin may receive from collectors. Another possibility is a broad strike, where the collar fails to contain the planchet properly during striking. Instead of receiving the standard shape and dimensions of a normal cent, the coin may spread outward in an unusual way. A genuine broad strike can provide an excellent example of how the striking mechanism works and how a mechanical problem can become a collectible error. Clipped planchets are another category worth investigating. A planchet may sometimes be improperly punched from a sheet of metal, leaving a section missing from the blank before the coin is struck. Once struck, the resulting coin can have a characteristic curved or straight missing section. Collectors should be cautious, though, because coins can also be damaged after leaving the mint, and artificial damage can sometimes imitate an error. A professional opinion can help determine whether the feature is consistent with a genuine mint-produced planchet error. One of the most exciting possibilities involving the 1982 cent is a wrong planchet error. Because of the composition transition occurring around this period, collectors are naturally interested in unusual pieces that may have been struck on an unexpected planchet. A confirmed coin struck on an incorrect planchet could be significantly more interesting than an ordinary example, especially if the physical evidence supports the conclusion. This is where weight, diameter, thickness, metal composition, strike characteristics, and surface appearance can all become important. A professional grading and authentication service can conduct the appropriate examinations and provide a more reliable assessment than simply comparing photographs online. Another possibility involves die cracks, die breaks, and cuds. Coins are struck using dies that experience tremendous pressure over thousands or millions of strikes, and dies can eventually develop cracks or break in particular areas. When those defects transfer onto coins, collectors may see raised lines or larger raised areas that reveal damage to the die itself. A dramatic cud, especially near the edge of a coin, can become an attractive collectible error. The size, location, and clarity of the die break can influence collector interest. Struck-through errors are another possibility. If grease, debris, or another foreign substance becomes trapped between the die and planchet, part of the design can appear weak, missing, or distorted. A genuine struck-through error can be fascinating, but again, it is necessary to distinguish mint-made characteristics from damage that happened decades later. The condition of a 1982 cent is also extremely important. Many examples circulated heavily and developed scratches, discoloration, dents, corrosion, and worn details. Others may have been stored shortly after production and could retain much stronger original surfaces. A high-grade coin with sharp details, attractive luster, and minimal marks can be much more desirable than a heavily circulated example. If an unusual error is combined with exceptional condition, the collecting appeal can increase substantially. This combination is one reason sensational values sometimes become attached to unusual coins. Nevertheless, value must always be based on evidence rather than excitement alone. An internet listing for a coin at an enormous price does not prove that the coin is actually worth that amount, and a speculative estimate is not the same as a confirmed auction sale. Serious numismatists look for documented rarity, authentication, grading, provenance, and real market demand. The hypothetical $105 million 1982 cent would therefore have to be an extraordinary outlier, not a normal example. To justify anything remotely approaching such a spectacular figure, a coin would need to possess characteristics that make it extraordinarily rare and desirable, perhaps involving an exceptionally important mint error, an unusual composition or planchet combination, an extremely high grade, and convincing documentation proving its authenticity and history. Even then, the final value would depend on what qualified collectors were actually prepared to pay. This is why the phrase, "worth millions," should always be approached carefully. Coin collecting is filled with fascinating discoveries, but it is also filled with misunderstandings about values, varieties, and errors. The safest approach is to learn the fundamentals, examine coins carefully, and seek professional authentication whenever a coin appears genuinely unusual. One of the most important rules for anyone searching 1982 cents is never to clean them. Cleaning can scratch the surface, remove original characteristics, create unnatural shine, and reduce the coin's desirability. If you think you have found an unusual piece, keep it exactly as you found it and handle it by the edges. A simple protective holder can help prevent additional damage while you research the coin. Magnification can also be useful for examining the date, lettering, mint mark, and other design elements, but the goal should be observation rather than alteration. Pay attention to whether an unusual feature appears raised or incuse, whether it follows the shape of the design, whether it affects multiple design elements, and whether it makes sense as a result of the minting process. A scratch caused by another coin may cut into the surface, while a die-related feature is generally raised on the finished coin. Learning these differences can dramatically improve your ability to identify potential errors. Another important area is the distinction between copper and copper-plated zinc examples. Because 1982 was a next 1999 D1 cent coin. Today we are taking a fascinating look at the 1999 D Lincoln 1 cent, a coin that may look completely ordinary at first glance but can become extremely interesting when unusual minting errors, rare varieties, exceptional condition, or other extraordinary characteristics are discovered. You may have heard dramatic claims that a spectacular 1999 D cent could be worth as much as $98 million, but it is important to understand that an ordinary 1999 D Lincoln cent is not automatically worth millions, and a figure this enormous should be treated as a hypothetical or sensational possibility rather than a guaranteed value. The real story is much more interesting because the value of a particular coin depends on what makes that individual specimen different from the millions of ordinary examples produced. The 1999 D cent was struck at the Denver Mint and belongs to the modern Lincoln cent era, a period when enormous quantities of cents were produced for everyday commerce. Because so many were made, the majority of 1999 D cents are common, but mass production also means that collectors can encounter individual pieces with unusual characteristics created during the minting process. These errors can include off-center strikes, double dies, broad strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, die breaks, struck-through errors, wrong planchet strikes, and other abnormalities. The first thing any collector should understand is that not every strange-looking coin is a valuable error. Coins can be scratched, bent, stained, corroded, chemically altered, or damaged by machinery after leaving the mint, and these forms of damage can sometimes look surprisingly dramatic. A genuine mint error must have characteristics that make sense within the manufacturing process. That is why careful examination, comparison with known examples, and professional authentication are so important when a coin appears unusual. One of the most exciting possibilities to investigate on a 1999 D cent is a double die variety. A double die originates during the preparation of the die and can produce genuine separation or duplication in portions of the design. Collectors may examine the date, Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, and other lettering or design elements for unusual doubling. However, it is critical to distinguish true double die characteristics from machine doubling. Machine doubling can happen during the striking process and often produces a flatter, shelf-like appearance that is not the same as a genuine double die. A collector who mistakes machine doubling for a major double die variety could greatly overestimate the coin's value. On the other hand, a confirmed and desirable double die can make an otherwise ordinary cent considerably more interesting. Another possibility is an off-center strike. During normal coin production, a blank planchet is positioned between the dies and struck with enormous pressure. If the planchet is improperly positioned, the design can become shifted toward one side, creating a coin with an obvious area of blank metal where the design should normally appear. A dramatic off-center strike that still retains the date and other important details can be highly collectible. The degree of displacement matters, and a major, clearly authenticated error is generally more interesting than a barely noticeable shift. Collectors also examine the edge and overall shape to determine whether the unusual appearance is consistent with a genuine striking error. A broad strike is another possibility worth understanding. The collar normally helps control the shape and dimensions of the coin during striking, but if the collar does not properly contain the planchet, the metal can spread outward. The result may be a coin that looks wider or differently shaped than a normal cent while still showing evidence of a genuine striking process. A true broad strike can be a fascinating collectible because it demonstrates what can happen when the minting machinery does not operate perfectly. Clipped planchets are another category that can attract attention. Before a coin is struck, metal sheets are punched into individual blanks called planchets. If the punching process is interrupted or incorrectly positioned, a section of the blank can be missing. Once the blank is struck, the resulting coin may show a curved or straight missing area. Collectors sometimes find these errors and carefully examine their shape, design displacement, and other characteristics to determine whether they are genuine. Artificially damaged coins can also have pieces missing, so authentication is particularly valuable when the claim is significant. Another potentially important possibility is a wrong planchet error. A coin can occasionally be struck on a blank intended for a different denomination or composition. Because the 1999 D cent was produced during the copper-plated zinc era, an unexpected planchet could potentially create a major collecting curiosity if the evidence were strong and the error were authenticated. Weight is one clue, but it is not enough by itself. Diameter, thickness, metal composition, edge appearance, strike characteristics, and other physical evidence must be considered together. A coin that is significantly heavier or lighter than expected might deserve further investigation, but environmental damage, wear, contamination, or alterations can also affect measurements. Professional testing is therefore the safest way to determine composition when the difference matters. Die cracks and die breaks provide another fascinating window into the manufacturing process. The dies used to strike coins experience enormous pressure and repeated use. Over time, cracks can develop, and if the damaged die continues striking coins, those cracks can transfer to the surfaces of the cents. These features may appear as raised lines or unusual raised areas. When a die breaks dramatically, a larger raised area called a cud can sometimes appear near the edge of the coin. The size and location of a genuine die break can influence collector interest, especially if it is distinctive and clearly attributable to the minting process. Struck-through errors are another possibility. If grease, debris, metal fragments, or other foreign material gets between the die and planchet, the affected portion of the design may appear weak, incomplete, or distorted. A genuine struck-through error can provide evidence of an unusual moment during production. However, collectors need to be careful because weak details can also result from worn dies, insufficient striking pressure, circulation, or corrosion. The condition of a 1999 D cent can also play an important role. Although these coins are relatively modern, many examples have spent years circulating through pockets, vending machines, cash registers, and storage containers. Scratches, fingerprints, discoloration, and contact marks can reduce desirability. A coin preserved in exceptional condition may retain strong luster and sharp design details, and high-grade examples can attract collectors who specialize in modern Lincoln cents. If exceptional condition is combined with a major authenticated error or rare variety, the coin can become considerably more interesting. This is where the idea of extraordinary valuations comes into the conversation. A hypothetical $98 million 1999 D cent would not be valuable simply because it says 1999 and has a D mint mark. It would need to be an extraordinary outlier with characteristics that are genuinely rare, important, authenticated, and highly desirable to serious collectors. There would need to be convincing evidence that the error was created at the mint, that the coin is genuine, that the condition is exceptional, and that the specimen has a credible history. Even then, no enormous price can be guaranteed in advance. The true market value of any collectible is determined by actual demand, and the strongest evidence usually comes from documented transactions, reputable auctions, and professional assessments. Online listings can sometimes show enormous asking prices, but an asking price is not proof that a buyer would actually pay that amount. This distinction is especially important in the world of rare coins, where sensational claims can spread rapidly. The responsible collector learns to separate genuine rarity from exaggerated internet stories. If you discover something unusual on a 1999 D cent, the first step should be preservation, not modification. Never polish the coin, scrape the surface, apply chemicals, or attempt to make an error more visible. Cleaning can damage the original surfaces and may actually reduce the coin's collectible appeal. Handle the coin carefully by its edges and place it in a protective holder. Then examine it under good lighting with reasonable magnification. Pay attention to the date, mint mark, lettering, Lincoln's portrait, the reverse design, the rim, and the overall shape. Look for features that appear to have been created during striking rather than after the coin entered circulation. For example, a raised line may potentially be associated with a die crack, while a scratch generally cuts into the surface. A displaced design may suggest an off-center strike, while an irregular edge could be a planchet issue or post-mint damage. Understanding these differences is one of the most important skills for anyone searching pocket change. Another useful step is comparing the coin with several normal 1999 D examples. If the same last 1979 D 1 cent coin. Today we are exploring the 1979 D Lincoln 1 cent, a coin that may look ordinary at first glance but can become remarkably interesting when genuine minting errors, unusual varieties, exceptional condition, and extreme rarity are involved. You may have heard sensational claims that a spectacular 1979 D 1 cent could potentially be worth as much as $90 million, but it is important to understand that an ordinary 1979 D Lincoln cent is not automatically worth millions. And a figure as extraordinary as $90 million should be treated as a hypothetical or sensational possibility rather than a guaranteed market value. The real excitement comes from discovering what makes a particular coin different, whether that difference was created at the United States Mint, whether it is rare enough to attract serious collectors, and whether professional authentication can confirm the characteristics. The 1979 D Lincoln cent was produced at the Denver Mint during an important period in the history of American small-denomination coinage, and millions of examples entered circulation. Because production numbers were large, most 1979 D cents are common, but large-scale production also created opportunities for unusual mistakes and errors to occur. Coins had to pass through numerous stages before reaching the public, including planchet preparation, die production, striking, inspection, counting, and distribution, and whenever mechanical processes operate on such a massive scale, occasional irregularities can happen. For collectors, those irregularities can become fascinating clues about the minting process. One of the first possibilities to investigate on a 1979 D cent is double die characteristics. A genuine double die can occur when the die itself receives more than one impression during its creation, potentially causing portions of the design to appear doubled or separated. Collectors may carefully examine the date, Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, and other design elements for unusual separation. However, this is an area where caution is extremely important because many coins that appear doubled actually show machine doubling, die deterioration, strike-related distortion, or damage. Machine doubling can create a flattened or shelf-like appearance and should not automatically be confused with a true double die. A confirmed double die variety with strong and recognizable characteristics can be much more interesting to collectors than a coin with ordinary mechanical doubling. Another possibility is an off-center strike. A blank planchet must be positioned correctly between the dies before the coin is struck. If it shifts out of position, the design can be impressed away from the center, leaving an unusually large blank area on one side. Minor displacement may be interesting, but a dramatic and authenticated off-center strike can become considerably more desirable, especially when the date remains clearly visible. The amount of displacement, the overall condition, and the authenticity of the error all matter when collectors evaluate such a coin. An off-center coin is especially fascinating because it provides direct evidence of a positioning problem during the striking process. Another possible error is a broad strike. Normally, the collar surrounding the planchet helps control the final shape and dimensions of the coin. If the collar fails to perform its function properly during striking, the metal can spread outward and create an unusually broad appearance. A genuine broad strike can be collectible because it demonstrates a specific mechanical failure during production. However, a coin that has simply been flattened or damaged after leaving the mint is not the same thing. This is why collectors should carefully examine the edge, rim, design details, and overall characteristics before assuming that an unusual shape is a genuine broad strike. Clipped planchets are another exciting possibility. Before the planchet becomes a coin, metal sheets are punched into blanks. If the punching process goes wrong, part of the blank may be missing, and the defective blank can later be struck into a coin with a distinctive missing section. Curved clips are among the most recognizable possibilities, but other types of clips can occur. The shape and characteristics of the missing area can help specialists determine whether the error occurred before striking. Artificially damaged coins can also have pieces removed, so authentication becomes increasingly important as the claimed value rises. Another intriguing possibility is a wrong planchet strike. A coin may occasionally be struck on a blank intended for another denomination or another type of coin. If a 1979 D Lincoln cent were discovered with strong physical evidence that it was struck on an incorrect planchet, collectors could have a fascinating example of a mint production error. Weight, diameter, thickness, edge appearance, and composition would all become important clues. However, a strange weight by itself does not prove a wrong planchet error because dirt, corrosion, damage, environmental exposure, or other factors can alter a coin's measured characteristics. Professional testing and authentication are essential when composition is part of the claim. Die cracks and die breaks are also worth investigating. Coin dies were subjected to tremendous pressure and repeated use, and eventually some could develop cracks or breaks. If a damaged die continued to strike coins, the defect could appear as raised lines or raised areas on the finished pieces. When a larger section of the die breaks away, a cud can sometimes form along the edge of the coin. Collectors may find these varieties particularly interesting when the feature is dramatic, clearly raised, and consistent with a genuine die failure. The size and location of the die break can affect its appeal, and a distinctive example may attract specialists who collect die state varieties. struck-through errors provide another fascinating possibility. During striking, foreign materials such as grease, debris, or other substances can become trapped between the die and planchet. When this happens, some details may appear weak, incomplete, or distorted. A genuine struck-through error can preserve evidence of an unusual event during production, but weak details can also result from worn dies, insufficient striking pressure, circulation, or corrosion. Therefore, careful examination is necessary before calling a feature a struck-through error. The condition of a 1979D cent can also play a major role in its desirability. Most cents from this era circulated through everyday commerce, passing through pockets, cash registers, vending machines, banks, and countless transactions. Over the decades, many developed scratches, contact marks, stains, discoloration, and worn surfaces. A coin that escaped circulation and remained in exceptional condition may retain much stronger original luster and sharper details. High-grade examples can be more desirable, especially when they are combined with a recognized variety or dramatic mint error. This is one of the reasons collectors do not judge a coin solely by its age. A coin does not have to be extremely old to be interesting, and a modern coin with a rare and authenticated error can sometimes attract substantial attention. The hypothetical $90 million valuation would therefore require an extraordinary combination of factors. A normal 1979D cent would not approach such a figure simply because it has a Denver mint mark. To justify a spectacular valuation, a specimen would need to be an exceptional outlier, perhaps featuring an extremely rare and important minting error, unusual planchet characteristics, exceptional preservation, documented provenance, and strong authentication. Even then, no value can be guaranteed before an actual market transaction. The final price of a rare coin depends on what qualified collectors are willing to pay, and major claims should be supported by credible evidence. An online seller can list an ordinary coin or even a damaged coin for an enormous asking price, but an asking price does not prove that anyone will purchase it for that amount. Serious collectors rely on auction records, professional grading, recognized varieties, authentication, and documented rarity. This distinction is particularly important for anyone watching videos about coins described as being worth millions. The goal should be to understand the real characteristics that could make a coin valuable rather than assuming every example of the date and mint mark is a hidden fortune. If you find a 1979D cent that looks unusual, the first rule is simple: do not clean it. Never polish, scrape, sand, chemically treat, or otherwise alter a coin that may have numismatic value. Cleaning can damage the surface, remove original characteristics, and potentially make professional evaluation more difficult. Instead, handle the coin carefully by its edges and place it somewhere safe. Good lighting and modest magnification can help you examine the date, mint mark, lettering, portrait, reverse design, rim, and edge. Pay attention to features that appear to have been created during striking rather than damage that occurred afterward. A scratch generally cuts into the surface, while a die crack is typically raised. A post-mint dent can distort the coin in ways that do not correspond with the normal striking process. Learning these distinctions is one of the